Right at the beginning of the 2015 reboot of the Jurassic Park franchise, Jurassic World, we see Zach and Gray Mitchell making their way towards the new park that's been built on Isla Nublar. And accompanying their journey, we hear John Williams' theme from Jurassic Park, copied verbatim from the 1993 film. This might seem like a strange place to start a discussion about the music in the original film, but what this sequence in Jurassic World shows us is just how difficult it is to create meaning for music. This sequence just doesn't give us what the filmmakers wanted it to. It might use exactly the same music, but with the unemotional and flat visuals, it fails to get even close to the visceral emotional response that so many of us had when we heard this music in its original context. Jurassic Park's themes and score have stayed with us all these years, not just because of the music itself, but more importantly, because of how we heard this music for the first time. So let's find out how Spielberg and Williams brought this story to life with music. For the first 15 minutes of Jurassic Park, we don't hear either of the two main melodic ideas. Many of the scenes are unscored or instead use dark, sometimes violent incidental music. The first musical sounds we hear in the film, for example, come in the form of this abstract, polytonal chord in synthesizer and choir. Which precedes a 4-note figure in pan flute, the carnivore theme. You'd be forgiven for thinking that all of the music in the film was going to be like this, but this musical language is necessary not just to create tension, but also to establish the emotional framework for the story, making the bright, major music that will follow feel even more uplifting. And so, after 15 minutes, we get this. A sudden shift in tone in the film. We hear this light, sparkling 12/8 melody, accompanied by a rocking sequence of chords as well as chordal and melodic countermelodies. Like so much of the music in the film, it never really settles in a single key, moving between multiple tonal centers. It's quietly excited, it's anticipating something. And that something comes when we cut to our first glimpse of the island. This fanfare, called the Journey to the Island theme, is the first of two principal themes. This is an instantly arresting melody. We hear two stable and declamatory perfect fifths, whose short long rhythm creates syncopation, making the music feel like it's accelerating in this first bar. Then, underneath, we hear mostly major and minor triads in the harmony, but the key center again isn't really defined. It's sort of in B-flat major, but the second chord is C major over B-flat, giving us the B-flat Lydian scale, and then we also get these borrowed chords in the second phrase, D and A major. The A major is even the final chord in this phrase, so we often get this very jarring shift up a half step as we move into the B-flat major chord on the downbeat of the next bar. With this unsettled harmonic language, combined with the strong, assertive melody, it makes the music feel both stable and unstable, never resolving, but always feeling satisfying in itself. The melody of the B section uses a lot of the same ideas as the melody we've just heard. 16th passing notes and large intervallic leaps, focusing here on a jump of a minor seventh. But it's now much more legato and less aggressive, played here by woodwind and strings. This pared back and quieter music is used by Williams to underscore the dialogue, allowing the words to come through in the mix. But when Spielberg returns to the wide shots of the island, Williams cuts sharply back to the A section, employing the punchy, biting sound of the trumpets and horns to bring the music back into focus. This whole section has a nervous excitement to it. As viewers, we aren't really shown much of the island, and as listeners, we hear music that doesn't really resolve, but that has an almost uncontrollable energy. Even as we reach what feels like the musical peak of the sequence and score, and as the A section melody shifts up a tone, the camera stays firmly on our characters. This is what the story is about. It's about the people at the centre of it all, who are on the cusp of experiencing what could be the defining moments of their lives. As they ride through the park, we hear soft variations upon the Journey to the Island theme, which eventually turns into dark, quietly simmering music. That interplay between excitement and fear is audible here, as the nature of what Grant is seeing is held from us. But this tension is completely released as we see what is perhaps one of the most iconic scenes in film history, accompanied by John Williams' theme from Jurassic Park. This majestic theme is built around the tonic note, B-flat, which is returned to over and over, anchoring the music. And combined with the dotted rhythms and slow tempo, the music feels like a procession or a hymn. A wordless song for the beauty and majesty of the scene. The harmony also adds to this hymn-like feel. It's deep, warm, and grounded, and has moved away from the harmonic instability of the Journey to the Island theme. We hear almost entirely diatonic tonal chords, tonic, dominant, and subdominant harmony. And with the move to and from the 1 and 4 chords in the first 2 bars, we get these repeated plagal cadences. There's a spiritual feel to the music, which is further amplified by the addition of the choral texture as the theme develops. We're hearing the voices of the past. The second half of the theme develops the neighbour note melody of the first half by repeating these cascading fragments on top of the 1-4-1 chord sequence. But here we also get our first non-diatonic note, an A-flat. This adds just enough harmonic interest so that when we move back into pure B-flat major via a glorious, perfect cadence, it feels all the more satisfying. Williams now adds a repeating 16th note pattern in flutes and bells, and eventually a counter melody in woodwind and brass. Sattler and Grant are beginning to realise what they are witnessing. They can't contain their emotion, their excitement, and neither can the music. The full orchestral forces sing out the melody. The power of the music is enhancing the visuals, but it's also happening the other way around. This music is felt deeply within us because we are experiencing this as a child experiences the world, with complete honesty, innocence, and wonder.
How'd you do this? I'll show you.
So the question is, what happens to these two themes for the rest of the film? Well, this is where it gets interesting. These ideas are actually barely used. In fact, we won't hear the theme from Jurassic Park for an hour after its first rendition. And the Journey to the Island theme is only heard twice during this period. First, when Tim is talking to Dr. Grant before they set off on the ride.
Well, a few species may have evolved along those lines.
And second, when they travel through the Jurassic Park gates. But I'd argue that this is one of the central reasons why these themes are so effective. In the second act of the film, everything goes wrong for our characters. The collapse of the security systems in the park, the T-Rex attack, and the separation of Tim, Lex, and Grant from the others. And accompanying almost all of these scenes, with a notable exception of the first time the T-Rex appears, we hear some of the most aggressive, visceral, and colourfully orchestrated incidental music that John Williams ever wrote. From the eerie, chromatic choral texture for the hatching of the baby raptor, to the wild music that accompanies the second T-Rex attack.
Right now. Go, let's go. Hey.
There are so few moments of calm in this second act that the use of the bright, major themes wouldn't just be inappropriate, but would also diminish the impact of the times when they are heard. But after Grant and the children find shelter in a tree, the film is finally given the space to breathe. We hear a Celeste playing a simple melody, which fades quietly into the theme from Jurassic Park.
Just have to evolve too.
What do you call a blind dinosaur?
Only the second time we've heard it in the film. We're taken back here to the feeling we experienced when we first saw these animals, but this feeling is now placed in the context of everything that's happened in the story. This version, with its pared down, glassy and fragile orchestration, now speaks of lost hope and lost excitement. Accented by the juxtaposition of this scene with the next, where we see Hammond in the visitor centre, mourning the loss of his dream. This melody seems to have changed, so what about the journey to the island theme? Whilst it too was music of anticipation and excitement, it becomes in the third act of the film more associated with the characters' journeys and their triumphs than with adventure. As Sattler and Muldoon prepare to find Arnold, we hear a militaristic version of the fanfare. Despite the unsettled figures in strings and percussion underneath, the melody seems to be encouraging them onwards. And this is mirrored during the next moment of success in the film, when Lex resets the security systems in the park. A victory that's made even more cathartic by the unbearable tension of the raptor attack that preceded it. Here, we finally get a triumphant brass rendition of the melody, getting us even closer to its original orchestration. But the music will only be fully reformed at the climax of this sequence, after our characters become trapped by the raptors, at a point where all seems to be lost. They are, by a stroke of luck, saved by the T-Rex, accompanied by a blasting version of the Journey to the Island fanfare. This is what the music right at the beginning of the film set up. We weren't shown anything then, because it was saving it all for this moment. Music never exists by itself. We are constantly forming relationships between music and the world around us, between music and sights, music and people, and between music and emotion. And great films like Jurassic Park understand these relationships. The themes that John Williams wrote for the film are deeply affecting by themselves, but the real power comes through the complex and emotional connections we make with the music when it's paired with inspiring and life-affirming stories like this one. In this way, the music doesn't need to be used a lot at all. In fact, by only using these themes sparingly, by placing them carefully within the narrative, we can build even stronger connections with the music. And we can reflect on not only what they mean to the characters and story, but also, more importantly, what they mean to us. And so, in this dialogue-free epilogue, when we hear Williams's theme from Jurassic Park for the third and final time, we are given the space to put ourselves in this story, to create our own meaning, and to find, amongst all the chaos and beauty of the world that we live in, a place where we belong. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're new here, welcome to the channel. This is now my 4th video on John Williams' scores, so if you'd like to take a look at the others, follow the links in the description below. Almost every one of my videos has a copyright claim, so if you want to support my channel, then take a look at my Patreon account. There you can get early access to videos, and you can also get extra perks like PDFs of the scores that I use in my videos. See you next time.